always pre-qualify for a loan before you start looking. Farmers State Bank makes it easier than ever to start the loan process with online checklists, forms, and calculators. Your dream home is out there. Get started today at farmersebank.com. Farmers State Bank, an equal housing lender and member FDIC.
Looking great is not just helpful for females. In today's competitive business market, men are finding cosmetic work can give them the edge they need to stay ahead of the game. You're invited to see for yourself how Northwest Plastic Surgery Associates' discreet laser and cosmetic treatment programs are helping men of all ages regain youthfulness and confidence, sometimes in as little as one visit. Northwest Plastic Surgery Associates can help reverse years of stress and time in the sun with skincare and skin rejuvenation services, or let them help you permanently get rid of that unsightly hair on your chest or back. Plastic surgery is losing its stigma among men, and the results have been tremendous. Liposuction, male breast reduction, tummy tucks, it's no secret that men want to look good too. And sometimes a simple procedure can add years to your professional life. Book your consultation and learn how cosmetic treatment can bring your inner beauty to the surface.
Call Northwest Plastic Surgery Associates today, 728-3811, or visit nwpsa.com.
Here's to you, the intrepid explorers, driven doers, and off-road adrenaline addicts. Thanks for making Polaris America's best-selling off-road brand. It's time to celebrate with great deals on the world's biggest and best off-road lineup. Live life wide open in a high-performance RZR. Tackle anything from mountains to mud holes on a legendary Sportsman ATV. Get more done with a hard-working Ranger, or elevate your adventure in a versatile Polaris General. Now's the time to find your perfect ride, with financing as low as 3.99% APR for 36 months and savings up to $3,500 during the Polaris New Year's sales event at Kurtz Polaris, 2904 West Broadway in Missoula and Highway 83 in Sealy. The mountains are full of snow, and Kurtz has all the best machines, apparel, and accessories to take full advantage of the season. Online at KurtzPolaris.com, the most fun you can have in snow. Kurtz Polaris, winter awaits. Offers valid in U.S. through 2/29/20 on new 2016 through 2020 vehicles. Subject to credit approval. Offers vary by model. See dealer for details. Always wear a helmet. Never drink and ride.
Hi, I'm here to learn more about guardianships.
Okay. Well, a guardianship is appointed by a court in the event that you are no longer competent or your guardian would have control over decisions that affect your health and well-being.
Okay, so how is a conservatorship different?
Conservatorships apply to your finances, and the court does not need to deem you incompetent prior to relinquishing control to a conservator.
Oh.
If you or someone you know is being exploited, please report to Aging Services Bureau at 844-277-9300 or the Legal Service Developer at 1-800-332-2272. This message sponsored by the DPHHS Aging Service Bureau.
Are you interested in putting solar panels on your roof? Do you want the latest on Montana's renewable energy policies? The Montana Renewable Energy Association is a leading voice for renewable energy education and advocacy in Montana. From community-based clean energy events to advocating at the Montana legislature, they work to ensure Montana's future is powered by the sun, wind, and earth. Find out more about MREA and join as a member by visiting montanarenewables.org or calling 406-214-9405.
ESPN Radio for Western Montana, KKVU HD3 Stevensville, and 102.9 FM on K275BS Missoula. It's 4 o'clock. Welcome to Tutela Nuanez, Montana's only statewide sports talk show. Broadcast on 102.9 ESPN Radio for Western Montana and across the state on SWX Television.
I like football!
Now, sports talk from Montana for Montana. Live from the Kurtz Polaris studio, here is Ryan Tutel and Coulter Nuanez.
Hello, Montana. Matt Miller leaving Montana State, going to Boise State, who will replace him as the OC. Bobby Petrino in at Missouri State. Baseball, things don't seem to be going that well. The NFL, things seem to be going very well. We will get to all of it. Hello, hi, how are you? Hope you are having a wonderful Thursday afternoon across the great state of Montana. Ryan Tutel, Coulter Nuanez. That's why it's called Two Telling Nuanez Boys and Girls on ESPN Radio and SWX Montana Television. Great to be with you. Thanks for letting us be on board with your afternoon. If you would like to find us on the World Wide Web, you can do so, 1029ESPN.com. You go check us out there. You listen live on the stream. Stream available whenever you want it. It is that simple. You listen live on the Listen Live tab. It is there thanks to Opportunity Bank, your local bank, your opportunity. If you'd like to call, you can do that as well. 329-1899, that phone number, 329-1899. All guests join us via the Rankage Brothers RV phone line. Let's take a look at what we got in the show today. We're going to spend some time. The big news across the state today, Matt Miller officially out at Montana State as the offensive coordinator because he has left to go take the wide receivers job at Boise State. So we will cover that transition and a quick moving early career for a young guy. He's not yet 30 years of age. Has already been the OC at the FCS level and is now on board at Boise State. So we will go through that. And also some discussion about who might replace him at Montana State. And one name in particular, a very intriguing one. So we'll get into that. We touched very briefly on the sort of fiasco that was the who is Missouri State going to hire as their new head coach yesterday, but we'll get into that more in depth, particularly as Missouri State is a team that is a Grizzly opponent in the 2020 season, and so we will cover that as Bobby Petrino officially selected either over or instead of, or who knows where Art Briles' name came from. Art Briles just trying to get work anywhere he can, and seems not to be able to, and I'm not sure that I think that's all that bad of a thing. And yet Bobby Petrino still able to get work, and so, okay, there you go. There's Missouri State. Okay, Art Briles, a high school coach somewhere in Texas. Okay. We also will touch a little bit on baseball, a couple of different things. Obviously, yet another manager or manager-to-be bites the dust, Carlos Beltran, who was signed, sealed, and delivered. Not signed. I mean, he was the Mets manager, though he did not manage a game for the Mets. Is no longer the Mets manager after the fallout from Houston. Obviously, we had John Sorrentino on yesterday to talk to us about that. But we will get into a little bit of that stuff, as well as the Missoula Paddleheads announced officially their coaching staff for the year 2020, and Darren Garner going to be the manager of the Missoula Paddleheads this season. So we'll get into that just a little bit. Top of the hour, we're going to spend some time with the NFL. We have covered a little bit, well, we've covered a lot of the NFL, but we haven't done a lot on the championship weekend that is forthcoming. So we will touch on that stuff as well. Maybe some high school stuff. And guess what? You know what? Now, David has been back there producing for us now for a couple of months. And he's been very central in the podcast stuff that we have gotten going. And again, very happy to have the Grizz Greats podcast up and official and underway. And you can check that out at your leisure. Just search Grizz Greats wherever you get your podcasts, and you can hear episode 1 of that podcast series released yesterday. But he hasn't spent a whole lot of time on air. He's actually spent more time on air on this show than I realized, because we usually think that he's talking in our ear. Come to find out that some of the things he's said have actually been on the air, but we have no way to decipher when we're in here, Coulter, you and I, which is which. We're going to bring him on here today. We're going to release him onto this world in some small dose. So we'll see how this goes. This should be fun some point. So there you go. There's the show today. And Coulter, let's start here though with Montana State and the news coming out of Bozeman. Matt Miller out. I say out when I say that, it sounds like he's leaving from Montana State, taking the job as the wide receivers coach at Boise State, which, obviously when you're talking about career trajectory and all that kind of stuff makes sense. How old is he? 28 or now 29 years old?
I think he's 28. Okay. He's a grade younger than my brother. So yes, 28 going on 29.
And he was the wide receivers coach at Montana State, and then in the shakeup midseason with, the Bob Cole, who was the offensive coordinator, no longer being that. Matt Miller gets moved up, and Montana State improved quite a lot. Was that this last year or a year and a half ago now?
It was with 6 games remaining in the 2018 season. And so Matt Miller coached 21 games total at Montana State as the OC, called plays for 21 games.
As the OC, called plays, and the difference in production offensively in the 6 games that he coached in the 2018 season compared to the first half of that season was marked. It was clear the impact that he made. Last year, it was a struggle. Then it was good, and then it was really bad. and then it was outstanding. And they finished very, very strong, obviously the semifinal notwithstanding. And he, put together ultimately what you would say, I mean, the team was as successful as a team has been at Montana State in 35 years. But they also, offensively, were very, very good. Now, some of that was getting guys back. I mean, you're going to be a much better offensive coordinator when Isaiah Ifosse is running the football for you.
Certainly.
But he showed, his prowess and what he was able to do, and now he gets an opportunity, not just at the FBS, but at the premier college football school, certainly in the Mountain West, and one of the maybe 3 or 4 jewels of the mid-major conferences when you talk about a team that's perennially a top 25 team in Boise State, and they were yet again this past season. So he goes there and will be the wide receivers coach. So let's start with the Matt Miller part of this, Coulter, and then we'll move on to the replacing of the OC that Jeff Choate has in front of him and who some people are that may be in line for that, or maybe names that come up, because I think there's at least one very interesting one.
I think that it's an interesting analysis if you know Matt Miller personally and or you have observed him coach live and in person. But broadly, from a 30,000-foot view, it's an incredibly non-surprising move. I mean, Matt Miller is among the greatest receivers in Boise State history, certainly statistically.
Yeah, he's an alum, right? Yeah.
I mean, Matt Miller is from Helena. He was the Gatorade Player of the Year at Helena Capital. He's one of the great 3-sport athletes Montana has produced in this century. Matt Miller, if he wouldn't have had the ankle injury he had his senior year at Boise, I don't really know if he would be into coaching because he might still be playing. I mean, Matt Miller was an outstanding athlete. He's a class younger than my brother, but I watched Matt Miller compete from when he was 6th grade on, and he was a Division I caliber basketball player. He was the state record holder in the 110-meter hurdles. Certainly a Division I caliber track athlete, and he was obviously a Division I caliber football player who went to Boise State and was a 4-year starter, graduated with the most catches in school history. He's top 3 in yards and touchdowns. He would have certainly had those records if not for the injury that he suffered. And he's a Boise State legend. And so all of that makes this hire seem so obvious.
One other thing, too, if I might add to it. You talk about, I mean, like if you were going from Montana State in the year that they just had to UNLV, right? It's not clear that that's a better, I mean, it's clearly not a better situation football-wise, and It's just not clear that it's even an improvement in play, okay?
Right.
Certainly, though, it is when you go to Boise State. But more than that, Brian Harsin, who's the head coach there, first of all, is proven now. A lot of people want to see, okay, Chris Peterson moves on. Can this guy actually do it? Well, he can do it. He's 64-17 since 2014 as the head coach of Boise State.
Right.
But he's also making, are you ready, $1.75 million as the head coach there.
Totally.
Tenfold what you're making as the head coach at one of the Montana schools.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
even though you're not the OC anymore, he's going to have a significant increase in pay. I would think double, perhaps triple, to be the wide receivers coach at Boise State, what he's making there. And that is significant, man. Well, you go from 10 to 30 million, yeah, it's a big deal, but not nearly as big a deal as when you go from 100,000 to 500,000. I mean,
Matt Miller will probably be making in the mid 200s.
Yeah.
As wide receivers coach at Boise, and I'm not sure what he was getting paid at Montana State. Standard for Montana, state coordinators, is usually between $90,000 and $110,000, depending on your experience. I know guys like Tim Cramsey at Montana State, Ty Gregorak at Montana and Montana State were getting paid $100,000, $105,000, $110,000, a little bit over the 6-figure, just because they had pretty lofty and experienced resumes. It wouldn't have surprised me if Matt Miller was making in the high 80s to low 90s at Montana State. Certainly good money for Montana, no doubt. But
if now you're doing $250,000, what you're able to do and the life you're able to live is hugely different.
He's doubling or tripling his salary.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of stuff that goes into these things. And, on one hand, I always think that if you get a chance to coach at your alma mater, that's a very special and unique thing. But I also always sort of am wary of guys that return to their alma mater early in their careers, because if and when it goes awry, a lot of times that can be the thing that ends your career. Because if you yourself or your staff gets fired, you don't have the landing pad. Like, say Matt Miller was to rise through the ranks and somehow end up as like the offensive coordinator at Indiana or something, or the wide receivers coach at Indiana, but then he's out on his luck because the staff gets fired, then you can always go back home. And I've just seen some young coaches. I mean, like Rob Ash had a couple of guys who were Montana State alums on his staff who thought they had endless job security because they had this guy who's a 40-year head coaching veteran, and then when Rob Ash got let go, those guys got out of coaching. And a lot of it was personal choice too. But the other thing that I think that oftentimes gets glossed over, and I think we have an advantage in Montana, just know it's such a small state in population, it's a small community. We all know so much about each other and our personal lives. But a lot of times too, in the coaching business, you're married to your job, or you're married to your wife, and oftentimes when you're married to your job, when you have a wife, your wife has to accept the fact that you're married to your job. But I know Matt's wife, and she's a Boise State alum as well. She played volleyball there. I know she loves Boise, so that also makes the transition easier. I guess what I'm saying is that all roads lead to this being great on a personal level for Coach Miller.
Time will tell if it's going to be great on a professional level.
The thing that's so interesting about Matt Miller is that, again, he was one of the great athletes to come out of Montana over the last 20 years. And I think that when Matt went through all the things he went through with his ankle injury and just the abrupt and devastating end to his football career, I mean, he basically blew up his ankle that cost him the second half of his senior year. He rehabbed enough to get a shot with the Denver Broncos, and then he hurt it again, and the surgery basically ended his career as a player.
Right.
I think personally, deep down, he thought he got robbed of a lot of what he could have been. And that next fall, he transitioned to being a graduate assistant at Boise State. So he has worked with Coach Harsin before. And there's obviously the natural connections between Jeff Choate and Boise State. Three of Choate's first hires when he got the Montana State job were Matt Miller, Byron Hout, who was a linebacker at Boise State, and Gerald Alexander, who was a safety at Boise State. And a lot of what Montana State has tried to do culture-wise has been very similar to the Chris Peterson model of how to build a team. But when Coach Miller was a grad assistant, then there was a moment in time where he was thinking about walking away. He's a Montana guy. I know he loves Montana. He has always had an affinity for being a cowboy, a real cowboy. He wanted to be a rancher. And after that grad assistant job was over, he went and got a job on a ranch in eastern Montana. And I think that there was a portion of time where he thought that was going to be his life. Mm-hmm. And if you know Matt is a very reserved, very intellectual, thoughtful guy, but not he has a personality that is very different from what you'd expect from an elite athlete receiver type guy. He's not Chad Johnson. He's the opposite of that, right? He's very to himself. He's introspective type of guy.
Right.
But like him riding a horse seems to fit his personality way more than him rah-rah coaching up guys. But then Coach Choate talked him into coming in and coaching receivers, and then he's just blossomed since then. And as the OC, like you said, the results were undeniable. I mean, they were 15-6 with him calling the plays, two of those losses being to North Dakota State, one of those losses being to Texas Tech. So you take out the juggernauts and the FBS, and they're 15-3 with Matt Miller calling the plays. During those games that weren't Texas Tech or NDSU, they averaged 37 points per game in a run-first and almost run-only offense. He was incredibly creative with putting a whole bunch of different guys in positions to succeed. So I think his football acumen is not in question, no doubt, and his ability to coach football is not in question either. It's just interesting that he's going back. Again, on one hand, it's not a surprise he's going back to his alma mater, no doubt. But on the other hand, he's just an atypical personality for what is a coach. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, especially if you can fit it in on a staff. And I think that's one of the reasons why Jeff Choate loved him, is that Matt Miller is a quiet, thoughtful guy, and Choate is a incredibly extroverted, outgoing, but also a very thoughtful guy.
Right.
And I think that they clicked because they have this same love for the game, football IQ, but there's not the personality conflict where, like Jeff Choate and Ty Gregorak, it's just like when Ty was hired. 2 sticks of dynamite in one hole.
Yeah.
At some point, it's going to blow up.
Yeah.
So
Usually one stick of dynamite.
Congratulations to Matt Miller. I just think it's an interesting transition because Matt Miller was the youngest offensive coordinator in Division I football.
Okay. Yeah.
To step away from being able to call plays, I mean, most of the time the path is once you're an OC, you stay an OC, no matter where you go. So to just go back to being a wide receivers coach, it's just interesting, but the fit itself makes sense.
Well, and again, at 28 or 29 years of age, whatever it is, I mean, there's a lot of years out there ahead of him to continue working. But again, the progression is hard to come by at times. Sutel Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. But Colter, let's go back to Montana State and Bozeman, because they, one way or another, have a vacancy now at the top spot of their offense, and particularly when you talk about Jeff Choate as a defensive-minded head coach, the offensive coordinator is very, very critical. It's any coordinator position, but sometimes you were talking to me about Rob Ash, and Rob Ash had 7 different OCs or something like that. But at the same time, Rob Ash is the OC. I mean, he's the offensive mind and system guy, whereas Jeff Choate certainly is going to have his, opinions, maybe system of what he wants to do and how he wants to do it. But the offensive coordinator is presumably going to have quite a bit of autonomy to and it has to create an offense that's going to work. One guy whose name is out there, which I find very intriguing, is Dennis Erickson. Now, this is just. There's nothing substantiated or anything about this, but if you talk about circumstantially, obviously a guy who was 3-time Pac-10 and then Pac-12 Coach of the Year at 3 different schools, the only person
I guess two in the Pac-12 and one at Miami.
Right,
so
right.
Arizona State, Oregon State, Miami.
So, but 3-time Conference Coach of the Year in high major stuff, and we know the resume, right, of Dennis Erickson in the NFL and nationally elite football teams and all that. But he, he's been quote unquote retired, but he's always been around, and he's been in Bozeman at Montana State games, even hanging around, talking football with the guy. I mean, not just there in the stands watching it. His son coaches high school football at Coeur d'Alene. That's where he's been living, and I'm sure involved with that. And you talk about a guy who knows about as much football as you possibly could, and also is at a stage of life where he just wants to do it because he loves it, possibly. I'm not saying he does or doesn't, but he's a guy who's out there. He's not trying to make his way in the business or something like that. And also, let's be honest, I mean, the Montana State staff is a very young staff, relatively speaking.
Absolutely.
And to have a guy with that sort of experience, that sort of resume, you could see how that could work. Now, maybe there's ways in which it couldn't work. Dennis Erickson has been a head coach for a long time. Is that a problem that he's going to come in and now be on somebody else's staff? He's, I don't know exactly how old he is, but he's in his 70s for sure.
I think he's exactly 70.
Okay, 70. And somewhat of an idiosyncratic guy, kind of an out-of-the-box type of guy. How much does that, personality work inside the room or whatever?
72,
I don't know.
73 in March.
72. Now will be 73 when the season starts.
He's a Montana State alum. That's
right.
Worth noting.
Went and played football at Montana State and has tons of Bozeman ties and spends times in Bozeman of his own fruition. Has been there. In fact, was on our show.
On the way to Bozeman.
Going to Bozeman.
He had his clicker on, turning on to 19th, I think.
So in any case, hands free. Okay. It's certainly the most notable name that you have out there, and of course there's going to be plenty more names that get surfaced. But I find that really intriguing, and I would get a huge kick out of it if he ended up, if that was something that ended up happening. Again, no idea if that's even slightly in a likely scenario. But he is a guy who's around, who certainly. Nobody else is going to have a better resume than him to bring to Jeff Choate and go, well, yeah, I actually can do this.
Certainly. I thought that you mentioned the arc of this last season for Montana State. They looked pretty good offensively for the first half of the year. Then they had the downswing, bottoming out with the 12-point performance and the 16-12 loss at North Dakota, where they looked horrendous offensively. But then the next week, one of the most undertold and I thought impactful tweaks that they made was they moved Matt Miller onto the field.
Right.
And they kept Denarius McGee, the running backs coach, former Montana State quarterback, in the box so he could be the eye in the sky offensively. Eric Frazier, the wide receivers coach, was also up in the box. But then they had Matt Miller, who's the offensive coordinator, as well as Brian Armstrong, former OC, also the run game coordinator, who doesn't get enough credit for the work he's done with their run game, on the sideline. And that made the offensive continuity excel quite a bit. But those first two home games, I guess it was actually the first home game against Southern Utah when they won 42-7 and they scored 42 points in the first half. Dennis Erickson was on the sideline standing next to Matt Miller that whole game. I have no idea what was said, how much Dennis Erickson contributed, or if he was just a steadying factor, or if he had any involvement at all. But he was right there standing next to Matt Miller. I just don't think that's a coincidence.
Yeah.
The other thing about Coach Erickson is he's quote-unquote retired multiple times. And the guy obviously just loves football. I mean, he retired from the University of Utah. Then all of a sudden he's coaching at Coeur d'Alene High School. He's helping his son at Coeur d'Alene. And then all of a sudden he's the head coach of the AAF team from Salt Lake. And then that goes belly up. And he's driving to Bozeman every weekend to see what's going on with the Cats.
Yeah.
On one hand, Dennis Erickson is one of the great offensive minds in college football history. He invented the single back offense, or was one of the pioneers of that offense. Great success, whether it was Idaho, Wyoming, Washington State, or Miami, Oregon State, Arizona State. I mean, his resume, like you said, it's undeniable. The biggest question to me would just be, Montana State's very special to Dennis Erickson, obviously. He continues to come back to Montana. He continues to spend time in Bozeman. Would he be able to work under someone at his alma mater? How would the chemistry between him and Jeff Choate work out? Jeff Choate, you said relatively young staff. It's undeniably young. I mean, Kane Ione is the oldest defensive coach that he has. Kane Ione is not yet 40. All the guys on offense, I mean, Denarius McGee is not yet 20. I mean, he's not yet 30. I don't even know. He might be 26, 27 years old. I mean, Denarius McGee is super young. Eric Frazier is super young. That's been kind of the model that Jeff Choate wants to encompass.
Right.
And I think that's also another point worth making is that when coaches move on, I don't think that it is anything but just elevated opportunities. I mean, that's what Coach Choate wants. He hires young guys intentionally so they can work hard and move up. And that's what I think that's what one of the things he sells to them when he hires them. But Dennis Erickson is an interesting name. Another name that's come up is Bush Hamden. He was he's been in the Chris Peterson coaching tree for a little while. He's worked at Boise State. He was almost hired as the offensive coordinator at Montana State when Jeff Choate first got the job, but then he ended up taking a job with the Atlanta Falcons, and then he went to the University of Washington with Chris Peterson. He's since been let go at UW, so he's available. Junior Adams is another name I've heard thrown around. Junior Adams is a Montana State alum who has spent time at Eastern Washington, Western Kentucky, but now he's at Washington, so he'd have to take a really substantial pay cut. He's a wide receivers coach at Washington.
Right.
It's not out of the question that you take a pay cut to become an OC for the first time, but I just don't know if you want to leave what seems like a good thing. But the fact that there's a change in leadership at Washington, Junior Adams could be a guy that's in the mix. Who knows? But it'll be interesting to see because the thing I would say about Matt Miller moving on is, like I said, it's not that surprising he's going back to his alma mater. Matt Miller is such an intriguing coach because of how much potential he has, because he's already been a recruiting coordinator and an offensive coordinator before the age of 30. There's very few guys that have ever been able to say that they've done that at any level of football.
Right.
But on the other hand, like Matt Miller was very very solid as the OC the last 21 games for Montana State. The numbers bear that out. The success bears that out. But it's not as if he's irreplaceable. And so I think that people ask, what does Matt Miller leaving Montana State do to the program? Well, I think that the answer will only come depending on who Jeff Choate hires and what sort of success that they have. Because, he could hire someone as good or better in certain ways than Matt Miller, or he could also hire someone that's not good at all. And it all comes down to who comes next.
Yeah. Well, and again, I mean, this is the nice thing to me about the position that Jeff Choate is in, is that now going into his fifth season, he has this is 100% his program. Completely top to bottom, his program. And so when it comes to something like fit, like you never know exactly, no matter what, whoever you're hiring, what the actual day in, day out experience of that person is going to be and so forth and so on. But at least you have a handle on the program and know what it is that you're looking for. And there's no doubt, what did Jeff Choate say before, Coulter? He's like, look, guys come and go, but look, I'll be honest with you. I already know who I'm hiring the day some guy comes and tells me he's moving on.
Well,
I have my list at least of guys.
Always says, I have my list in my top drawer on who I'm going to hire.
Of who you should. And that's, that's smart, right? That's as it should be. It's just but that list is not stagnant, right? I mean, that list changes regularly. The guys on that list may be getting jobs elsewhere, or guys on that list may be off of that list for whatever reason, coming onto it. So that list is a dynamic list.
It's a good point, too, because sometimes when guys are leaving to go another school, sometimes they can blindside the head coach because they're not talking about it. I guarantee you that Jeff Choate knew this was on the horizon, both in his heart because he believes in the potential of Matt Miller, but also I'm sure that they've talked about it. I mean, they're both Boise guys. That they both came from the same origins. So,
well, you would certainly think that Brian Harsin probably reached out, or certainly somebody on his staff, to Jeff Choate to say, "Hey, tell me the truth about this guy. Is this worth our time?"
Sometimes in the college football business, though, like you're getting out without you're telling your employer at the last minute that you're leaving.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't think
it's
this
a very
is
different deal.
This is not a blindsided thing,
right?
The one thing, though, is that every time Choate has had someone leave his staff, he's replaced them in short order. He's replaced them in a week or less. I'll be interested to see the timing of this one, though, because even though they have Tucker Rovig returning at quarterback, they're going to have a quarterback competition with Matt McKay, the North Carolina State transfer coming in.
That's right.
Who knows what they're going to do with Troy Anderson, but they have spring ball to figure it out. Now, oftentimes in the coaching world, you got to strike while the iron's hot because guys are only available. The best guys, or the guys that might be the best for your opening, are only available at certain times. But I also wouldn't be surprised if they navigated the spring ball with. I mean, Brian Armstrong's still there as the run game coordinator. They're trying to groom Denarius McGee for bigger things. That's why they've let him coach multiple positions, despite his background as a quarterback. Mm-hmm. And then you have Dennis Erickson in the fold, who obviously wants to help, regardless if he wants to be a full-time coach with recruiting responsibilities and all that. Who knows? But if Montana State navigates spring ball with Dennis Erickson as, say, like an advisor, and Brian Armstrong and Denarius McGee just kind of trying out for the job, and then to me, you want to hire an OC that's going to be catered to your quarterback. But if you don't know who your quarterback is, maybe you have a couple weeks of spring practice before then you say, okay, we're going to go with this sort of offensive identity, this quarterback, here's who we want. Hire internally or not. Maybe talk Dennis Erickson into it, let him get his feet wet or not. Maybe Bush Hamdan becomes available or not. Or maybe you promote from within. Who knows? I just think that this one might be a little bit more, it might be a longer hiring period than it has been in the past.
It might be not Tuesday that we're delivering this information to.
But also it could be Tuesday because Choate might just have his list and he might just have it circled and he might have already hired a guy, so who knows.
Sutel Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. On the other side, coaching at another university, an FCS school, Missouri State, took a very interesting turn the last 48 hours, so we'll go through that with everybody here for a little while as well. Coulter, the Polaris New Year's sales event is on now, and it's the time to find your perfect ride at Kurtz Polaris. Financing as low as 3.99% APR for 36 months and savings up to $3,500. Kurtz Polaris is at 2904 West Broadway in Missoula and on Highway 83 in Sealy. The mountains are full of snow, and Kurtz has all the best machines, apparel, and accessories to take full advantage of the season. Online at KurtzPolaris.com. The most fun you can have in snow. Go check them out. Kurtz Polaris. Winter awaits.
When the mountains are calling, a Floco Mocha is just what you need to hit the road. Florence Coffee serves an exclusive, rich, all-natural chocolate blend for a mocha like no other. Top it off with real whipped cream, and you're set for whatever your day has in store. Get your Floco Mocha at any of our locations throughout western Montana and go to FlorenceCoffeeCo.com.
The best flavor under the big sky, Florence Coffee Company.
At the Montana Club, our goal is to create a menu of mouth-watering food with variety to satisfy any craving. From the garden-fresh ingredients in our salads to our succulent, perfectly grilled Montana Club Angus steaks, we take pride in every detail that goes into preparing your food. Top off your meal with a premium cocktail, wine, or microbrew. Come as you are and satisfy your craving with our home-style breakfast, lunch, and dinner at the Montana Club on Brooks and North Reserve, Missoula.
Hey there, Colter Nuanez from your favorite daily sports talk show, Two Tell Nuanez. I'm here with Tom from Aspen Sound. Tom, last winter I got a sweet car starter. It's something I think everybody needs.
You know, Colter, I couldn't agree more, and my wife sure thinks so too. We've got a lot of sweet deals. We actually have it capable now where you can start it from your phone from anywhere you'd like. We have two-way remotes that'll confirm to you the vehicle started all the way down to our basic package starting at just $299 installed. Come on in and check us out.
Feel the music at Aspen Sound.
Hey, it's Coulter, and I'm here with Catherine from The Advocates. If you've been in a car accident or need help dealing with the insurance companies, you should give The Advocates a call. They can tell you if you have a case right over the phone.
That's right. It doesn't cost anything to call, and we'd be happy to talk to you and assess your situation. You don't want to have to deal with contacting the insurance companies and setting up a claim. We can do that for you. We take the hassle out of the process, so you can just focus on getting better.
There you go, folks. If you've been injured in an accident, give The Advocates a call, 406-640-4444, or online at montanaadvocates.com. You deserve The Advocates.
This is Mike Nugent with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. Berkshire Hathaway provides Western Montana with full-time real estate professionals for you whenever you need us. Our reputation as the state's most knowledgeable and available real estate group has helped build unmatched trust in the Garden City and statewide. If you have been thinking of making a real estate move in the short or long term, give me a call. No pressure, no expectations. Just professional opinions and service at whatever pace you are comfortable with. Give me, Mike Nugent, a call today, 531-1802. And remember, every question is good to ask.
No matter how far you may go, there's always one just down the road. Town Pump, ooh, pump it up.
Your local Town Pump has lots of energy. Pick up a couple of 16.9-ounce Vita Cocos, buy one, get one free. And 16-ounce Monster or Reign energy drinks, 2 for $4. If you want it, Town Pump's got it. And there's one right down the road from you.
Town Pump, right down the road. Pump it up, oh yeah.
ESPN Missoula Sports Center.
Montana State is in search for a new offensive coordinator again. Good evening, Ryan Tutel, Colter Nuanez here. Some sports news for you. Multiple sources confirmed to Skyline Sports that MSU offensive coordinator Matt Miller will take a job with Brian Harson's staff at Boise State. The move was first reported by MTN Sports and confirmed by Mike Prater of the Idaho Press. Miller, a Helena Capital native and former Montana Gatorade Player of the Year, finished his playing career at Boise State in 2014 as the school's all-time leader in career receptions. He joined Jeff Choate's staff at Montana State as a wide receiver coach in 2016, the position he held for nearly 3 seasons. With 6 games left last year, he was promoted to offensive coordinator, a position he held through the end of this season.
After an evening of conflicting reports that also included former Baylor head coach Art Briles in the mix, Missouri State settled on hiring Montana native Bobby Petrino as its head football coach. The school officially confirmed on Wednesday. As of late Tuesday night, Football Scoop reported that Briles would take the job before Petrino was ultimately hired. Petrino is a Lewistown native who played quarterback for his father, Bob Punter Petrino Sr. at Carroll College. Bobby Petrino Jr. has previously been the head coach at Arkansas, Western Kentucky, and Louisville.
And finally, no Big Sky basketball action tonight for any of the teams in the state of Montana. This Saturday, the Grizzlies, men and women, will take on Idaho, while the Bobcats have Eastern Washington.
ESPN Missoula Sports Center is brought to you by Aspen Sound.
Well, pleasant afternoon to you.
You like Modest Mouse?
I'm all right with Modest Mouse. I've seen Modest Mouse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The last time they were in Missoula was fascinating. They played out at Big Sky Brewing, and it was a really rainy, cold day. Anybody that knows Isaac Brock, who has Montana roots, who's the
Helena, right?
He's from Helena, lead singer of Modest Mouse. They know that he's a very enigmatic guy. In my opinion, he's a musical genius. I mean, their catalog, which is not largely known, is impressive. But they played 3 or 4 songs, and because it was way colder than expected, this was a mid-September concert, but it was like below freezing and raining, and Montana, and their instruments couldn't get in tune, and so they just walked off the stage. And they were not there for 45 minutes. I'm standing in the rain. I'm like, they're not coming back. This is too bad. I really was excited about this. And then Isaac comes back out, and they played rip roaring, no breaks, like 9 killer songs in a row, and say goodbye. But they're incredibly good live, especially if Isaac is in a good mood.
Isaac, I feel weird referring to him by his first name because I don't know the man.
Isaac Brock, sure.
It's Tutel Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. By the way, boys and girls, SWX Montana TV. Thanks for being here. I saw them also out there, not at that show, though. It was a summer show. It was plenty warm. And as the stories go, he has a bit of a propensity to enjoy himself, not merely after, but often before and during a particular live show. And
certainly,
definitely
left that part out.
He got himself a little turned around, had to stop a couple of times, and he had the wrong guitar on, and there was some pretty evident exasperation by fellow bandmates over the state of affairs. I am, as you know, Coulter, a musical dope. So
really? What do you mean?
No, but I'm talking about like actually
playing music?
like knowing, hearing it. I love music. I listen to a lot of music, so I know music that way, like what I like and stuff. But like writing music, hearing what's in tune, what's that? No. I can't do any of that. So all I'm saying is,
I'm confused by what you're saying. You don't keep up with the trends of music?
No. Actually, like composing music.
Oh, like writing music and playing music.
Or like even understanding, like what somebody says, if you told me this was out of tune,
sure.
I can't help you there. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. So there was clearly frustration like happening on the stage because I could read like what's going on, and there was a couple moments where you go, oh yeah, you grabbed the wrong guitar, which I go, well, that seems pretty easy to do. You had a couple of hops and waters, and you got up there, you got 45 guitars to choose from. Pretty easy to grab the wrong one. That said, yeah, this is what you do professionally. It's probably not a great look for you, and also there's a certain bit of where, well, this is what Modest Mouse is.
You gotta have a better backline,
right? But in terms of listening to it, it sounded great to me. I didn't, I wasn't sitting there going, I can't believe, this is just, the critics, the real critics of this stuff. I'm not one of them. I'm there, just to enjoy. And I thought it was a grand time. So I'm not a huge Modest Mouse guy, but I like them, and I'm happy when I hear them, and I would go to another show if I had occasion to do so.
One of the most fascinating, when you're analyzing humanity, what it is to be a human, what does this life mean? What are we doing?
One of my favorite things.
One of the most consistently passed down afflictions, let's call it, but affliction is the wrong word because it has somewhat of a negative connotation. But it seems to me as if there's so many different societal and generational factors that influence the volatility of the mindset of a specific human. But one of the most consistent things throughout history is that people that are incredibly creative or gifted creatively are very tortured or have demons.
Can be, yeah.
And a lot of times that is why they can express themselves so well through music, through writing. But Modest Mouse, Isaac Brock just appeals to me so much because he is such a tortured person. Part of it is his own doing. He obviously lives the persona of that, and he has a lot of legendary habits that influence it. But I just think it's fascinating that you look at like the artists from the 1400s and the composers of the 1800s and the musicians of rock and roll in the 50s through now, and they all share certain parts of them that are the same.
That is a very wise consideration I think you're making there. Speaking of
tortured people, speaking of people that do it to themselves.
Well, maybe. I mean, listen, I always find it odd to speak about Bobby Petrino specifically, Paul as well, in the state of Montana because of the deep roots that they have here.
Right.
The outstanding and legendary. Listen, these are outstanding coaches. Okay, let's just be clear about this. These are, when you talk about Putter Petrino and what they're and on down the line.
Montana legend, no doubt. And I mean, and Bobby Petrino, for all of his shortcomings and all the scrutiny that he has received in the media and the public eye, at the end of the day, he's a kid from Lewistown, Montana that recruited Lamar Jackson to Louisville.
Right. And And so, and Mike Petrino, who's on the staff with the Lady Grizz, who's a nephew from some different line of Petrinos, but shares the same last name, Putter's grandson, who is a fabulous guy. I mean, I think
and Jason Petrino, who was just recently at Rocky, he's an excellent guy, great coach.
And so it's an odd thing to talk about when you understand the reputation, not just the reputation, but some of the realities of what has been a very public life, and it is when you are a head football coach, particularly at the high reaches of Division I, high major football and the NFL. But the reality is that Bobby Petrino has a long and sordid history of failures, personal failures, and missteps and humiliations, which particularly when you're talking about college football are untoward insofar as this backdrop narrative that Americana wants to create about the turning boys into men and the greatest teacher, the teaching tool in the world is football to, make these, guys productive, where, we want it to be about more than football, what's happening. Now, whether that's real or not, look, I think it is real in instances. I think there's plenty of places where that is happening and does happening, and some coaches are the greatest, not just teachers, but maybe molders or however you want to talk about it in the world that have this access and tool of sports to use to teach life lessons that are broad and so forth and so on.
It's why FCS football in the state of Montana is appealing, right? Because if you have the right guys at the helm, by and large, that is what the program is about. Dante Olson is an anomaly. Everybody else is just going to go be a real estate agent or a local businessman or whatever. And I think that both the head coaches right now in Montana do an excellent job at that, at the maturation and building of men.
And so when you talk about, a guy who's had as many public failings as Bobby Petrino has and the sorts of failings that those have been, it just simply does not. It's a round peg and a square hole, or however you want to talk about it, in terms of you're bringing this guy in to be, somehow grooming, 17, 18, 19-year-old kids into, productive citizens. Clearly what you're trying to do is only win football games, and maybe there's a certain, refreshing aspect of it where it's like, well, hey, by the way, that's all any of them are trying to do. Stop lying to yourselves. But especially when the choice then evidently was between him and Art Briles, of all people, and you look at Missouri State and you go, that this is the choice that you left yourself with for because you've been a bottom dweller in the Missouri Valley Conference for whatever. I mean, I don't know, but I sit here and I go, okay, this is what it is. Am I going to sit here and go, get on my moral high horse? No. But am I going to sit here and also endorse this? No. I'm just going to go, okay. Well, to shake my head, and that's that.
Man, I wish we had 30 minutes because
it's our show, Colton. We do whatever we want here.
There's a lot here to address.
We're already being told to go to break.
There's a lot here to address.
Let's do this.
Let's go to break and talk more about it, because I want to talk about the reason that the Petrinos, based on their resumes, should be beloved Montanans, yet they're not. But I think that's a very definitive reason why. And I think that also, though, the opening at Missouri State was a fascinating one because of what was available around the country at the moment, but also the trends in hiring in college sports across the board, particularly football and men's basketball. So let's take a break, and then we'll come back and talk about the Petrinos in Montana as well as the Missouri State opening.
Have you been in an accident and have no idea what to do? I'm here with Catherine from the Advocates Injury Attorneys.
Unfortunately, people are injured in accidents every day, and dealing with the insurance company can add even more pain to an already bad situation. That is where hiring the advocates can help. Let us guide you through the process and take on the hassles for you so you can just focus on getting better.
If you've been injured in an accident, give the Advocates a call, 406-640-4444, or online at montanaadvocates.com. The Advocates are on your side.
Hockey season is in full swing, and this year, whether you're playing in the league or just enjoying watching the Missoula Junior Bruins in action, the Desperado Sports Tavern has your pre- and post-game covered. Located just down the street from the ice rink, the Desperado's hot wings are consistently voted Missoula's best. They are also celebrated for their delicious burgers and extensive selection of beers, plus they've got all the pro hockey games on every night. So grab your friends, bring your appetite, and come warm up at the Desperado, located on South Russell across from the Y.
Guys, you're not alone. Half of all men have erectile dysfunction. Don't wait for a little blue pill to kick in. Get your sex life back with Gainswave Therapy at New Health, Montana. Gainswave is a safe, 20-minute medical treatment that breaks up blockages and repairs blood vessels. Gainswave is simple, non-invasive, and available at New Health, Montana here in Missoula. For a limited time, you can receive 2 treatments free as part of our pilot program. Visit newhealthmontana.com to learn more.
Red's Bar downtown is the perfect place to sit down, warm up, and watch the rest of this football season unfold with friends new and old. Plus, it's not just football season, it's the best time of the year with the NHL, NBA, and college basketball too. So slip into Red's for a drink and a game. Red's Bar has a welcoming atmosphere that always makes for a great place to meet with your friends or to make some new ones. Warm and inviting all winter long. Go enjoy sports and the Missoula community at Red's Bar. Red's Bar at 217 Ryman, a Missoula institution.
Bethel Community Church offers a free clothes closet that is open to the public each Tuesday. There are literally thousands of new and gently used items for the entire family in virtually all sizes. There's a good selection of cold weather clothing as well as casual, dress, and professional clothing, shoes, coats, and more. People are invited to take whatever they need. Call Bethel Community Church for more information at 721-2780 or visit www.bethelmissoula.com.
This is Tucker Sargent, head coach of the University of Montana lacrosse team, and I want to share the game of lacrosse with everyone. Now is the time to get your son or daughter registered for lacrosse with the Missoula Lacrosse Club for the spring season. Missoula Lacrosse Club is for boys and girls ages kindergarten through 8th grade, and no experience is necessary to join. Lacrosse is fun, fast-paced, and available to anyone who wants to play. Early registration discount ends January 31st, so go to MissoulaLacrosse.org to register and learn more.
Tutel and Nuanez on 102.9 ESPN Radio for Missoula.
Welcome back to Tutel and Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio, SWX Montana Television across the great state of Montana. Great to be with you at 102.9 ESPN on Twitter and Instagram. Go follow there. You can check us out, and also, make sure you go check out the podcast. Grizz Greats out now. Wherever you get your podcasts, search Grizz Greats and listen in and enjoy. We're happy to bring that to you. Coulter, we started on this conversation. Specifically, the news of it is that Missouri State has hired Bobby Petrino to be their new head coach of the Missouri Valley Conference, and we're kind of discussing the sort of the interesting points of this, particularly when the other candidate, whose name was actually by Football Scoop a sign that he was going there, was Art Briles, and obviously those two guys bring up a lot of different and mostly negative emotions to just people who are aware of their histories in the sport of football. And yet it's this interesting thing where they're both hugely capable head coaches. I mean, you're way out over your skis. You're out kicking your coverage hugely from a football standpoint if you're Missouri State and you land either one of these two guys. And now they have, and then you go and then you got to deal with the PR or whatever it is that comes from that. But especially in Montana, with the history that the Petrinos have in this state as football coaches that have gone out and made good and bad as they've had their careers on a very public forum. And so I know that you had a lot that you wanted to say about it.
Well, first of all, I think that in college athletics as a whole, the almost necessary relationship between the athletic director and the head football coach and the head men's basketball coach. I mean, that's what you're going to be judged by first and foremost when you're an AD. I think that's why you've seen ADs gravitate towards using search firms, because it sort of passes the buck in terms of accountability. But also, I think it's why you've seen ADs, like whether you're talking about Michigan hiring Juwan Howard, or Memphis hiring Penny Hardaway, or Northern Colorado hiring Ed McCaffrey. Big, splashy, big-name hires, because it gives you so much more leeway as an AD. If you hire Juwan Howard at Michigan and he does great, all the praise in the world to you. If he also falls flat on his face, you can just say, well, I shot for the stars. I mean, we went with the dude who has all the name recognition. It's just like at Northern Colorado. Ed McCaffrey has 2 years of high school football coaching experience. He could be horrendous. They could go defeated like they have in the past. Or he could be the shot in the arm that they need. But either way, the AD can say, well, we went completely outside the box. We didn't hire an alum like they had their last 2 hires. Instead, we went with the big-name guy. That's one point. And so I think it's worth noting that I think that there was, at the time that this hire was made, I think there was between 5 and 7 Division I football jobs that were open, Missouri State being one of them. You also look at Missouri State in the Missouri Valley Football Conference. Every school in the Missouri Valley Football Conference since the founding of the league in 2008 has had some semblance of success. Southern Illinois, Western Illinois, those schools have not had crazy success, but they've had moments where they were in the playoff mix. Indiana State even made the playoffs for the first time.
Yeah.
But then you've also had your Illinois states, and then the top tier of the league, North Dakota State, South Dakota State, and those schools are rolling. Missouri State has been the only completely downtrodden program in the league since the league was created. I think this last coach, he won 15 games in 5 years, so they have been consistently at the bottom of the league. So Missouri State had to do something. It's not surprising to me that they made a splashy hire. In terms of the Art Briles situation, you have to tread lightly on the whole thing, but man, on one hand, let's just not go there.
Okay.
I just think in some cases when you are the head and the figurehead
13 games
of a program, almost all the accountability goes on you. I also think there's situations where institutional lack of control trickles down, and there's people that are scapegoated. And I think that I'm not going to give my complete opinion on Art Briles. What happened at Baylor was horrific. Everybody that was involved as an authority figure that is in power positions deserved to be fired. But I guess what I'm saying is that it's such a broader thing than to pin it on one guy.
Sure.
I don't know if Art Briles deserves to be a head college coach again or not. I'm not surprised, though, that he was in the mix. But the main thing I want to talk about is the Petrinos in general, because Bob Petrino Sr., who was at Carroll College for many years, he's a legendary football coach. He's absolutely gruff and a take no prisoners, no nonsense, old school Butte type of guy. And I think in the 1970s and 1980s at a private Catholic school in Helena, Montana, I think that is a perfect fit. It goes a long ways. You can get away with a lot of stuff. And I'm not saying he was doing anything sketchy, just his personality that is very kind of in your face. And
right.
He's a Butte guy. He's a Butte guy. He's a tough,
old school, tough Montanan from a generations of the 40s, 50s, 60s.
Exactly.
Yes.
And it's like Michael Sean Dugar, our correspondent for the Seattle Seahawks, who writes for The Athletic. He covered Idaho football for the Moscow Pullman Daily News after he had graduated from college. And he had a very infamous run-in with Paul Petrino, where Paul Petrino got in his face. There was almost a physical altercation. But it's like Mike said, I mean, if there's anybody in the world that would hold a vendetta against Paul Petrino, it would be Mike Dugar. But it's like Mike said, from a pure football perspective, teaching toughness, teaching effort, Paul Petrino is a very good coach. Paul Petrino has some flaws. First of all, when it comes to the discipline of his team, we saw it in Missoula firsthand. And they had 15 penalties. But I think that's a reflection. I think that the reason that the Petrinos, like when you look at Bobby Jr. and Paul's resumes, if you were just to say, man, these guys are from Montana, they grew up in Lewistown, and then they went to high school in Helena, and they were at Carroll College, why aren't these guys so beloved? And I think that it's the same thread where a lot of the guys from Montana get on the outside. Montana is a neighborhood. You have to be, at the very least, cordial, but most of the time engaging and caring for your neighbor. And if ever you act arrogant, that's the one thing that Montanans can't handle. And I think that the fact that both of these guys have acted above Montana, or not even above Montana, but just above people, they both carried themselves with a level of arrogance, and that reflected in the fallout that Bobby Petrino had at Arkansas. I think he just really didn't think he was going to get caught for all the things that he ended up getting fired for. But we've seen it with Ryan Leaf, Brock Osweiler, some of the great people from Montana and sports figures.
Yeah, when you say the guys who've gone on to do to raise to some of the highest heights that you can attain.
Right, and if you continue to act like Montanans expect, like Dave Dickinson, you're deified. I mean, you are glorified and respected, and there's been a lot of guys that are just like that. And it's unfortunate that a couple of the most high-profile guys have been the ones that have gone the other way. But I also think it's a great testament to the state of Montana in the fact that if you do act with unabashed arrogance, you're not going to be welcomed back to one of the most welcoming places in the world.
You know, I think that a lot of the things you said are true. I would like to carry that conversation on an in-state level at another point in another day. We can't do it here, but I think there's some open conversation we could have about that. Good analysis.
Let's do it just a little bit and start the beginning.
We can do
of the
it
next
here.
segment.
Go to break.
Let's do it here, and then we'll get in the NFL. I want to keep talking about this a little bit because I think this is really fascinating.
We'll take a break, come back, we'll do some NFL, and Coulter has his way. He's bigger than I am, so he probably will get it. We'll continue on this thread of conversation. Boys and girls, right now, Lost Trail Powder Mountain, it's the place you want to go, okay? Lost Trail, down Highway 93. They're going to be open all weekend long, including on Monday, Martin Luther King Day. Okay, be open for the holiday. 18 groomed trails, conditions amazing. 58 inches of snowpack at the summit, 50 at the lodge. Total snowfall in the season, 132 inches. The snow, I mean, that's why you go. I mean, among very many other reasons, but it's always the best at Lost Trail. If you want powder alerts, okay, from Lost Trail, just text the word powder. They got a lot of it. To 31996. 31996. Get powder alerts right there over your phone and information about Lost Trail. You can also win a 5-day punch pass for the 2019-2020 season, okay? If you just go ahead, text again, powder to 31996. You'll be in the mix for a 5-day punch card over to Lost Trail Powder Mountain. Go to losttrail.com and also find them on Facebook, Lost Trail. Where you want to go. Powder Mountain, tis the season. Get out in the hills, go to Lost Trail, have a great time.
Experience matters. Walk into any Farmer State Bank to learn just how much. You'll find an experienced staff of professionals ready and willing to go the extra mile to help you succeed. Bank on the go with mobile and internet banking solutions, or enjoy our legendary personal service face-to-face in the lobby. Visit farmersebank.com or a location near you to learn more. Farmer State Bank, your Montana bank since 1907, member FDIC.
Now, the Montana Club's happy hour features BOGO beverages. Our expertly mixed cocktails, microbrews, domestics, and wine are buy one, get one free 7 days a week from 3 to 5:30. Stop in on Friday for Montini night. Sip on a top shelf martini for only $6, 5:30 to close. When you've worked hard all day and are ready to relax, the Montana Club has got you covered with BOGO happy hour 7 days a week, 3 to 5:30 on Brooks and North Reserve, Missoula.
Hi there. It's Les Schwab Tires. Well, more like Les Schwab alignment and brakes and shocks and wheels and tires. Now, some tire places don't offer all that. They only sell tires. And we're not sure how they sleep at night because all those services affect things like steering and stopping. That's why we offer more than tires to help keep you safe. Stop by or book an appointment at leschwab.com. Les Schwab Tires, doing the right thing since 1952.
On Russell, across from the fairgrounds.
In Western Montana, we know shopping local matters, and you may think you'd pay more for the quality and customer service that comes with it, but not at Selway Armory. Selway Armory is locally owned with knowledgeable specialists that can answer your questions. In addition to the expertise, though, Selway Armory also has a bigger selection and lower prices than the box stores. When you're in the market for firearms and accessories, save money with the experts at Selway Armory. Selway Armory, 2825 Stockyard Road, Unit E6, and online at selwayarmory.com.
This is Tucker Sargent, head coach of the University of Montana lacrosse team, and I want to share the game of lacrosse with everyone. Now is the time to get your son or daughter registered for lacrosse with the Missoula Lacrosse Club for the spring season. Missoula Lacrosse Club is for boys and girls ages kindergarten through 8th grade, and no experience is necessary to join. Lacrosse is fun, fast-paced, and available to anyone who wants to play. Early registration discount ends January 31st, so go to MissoulaLacrosse.org to register and learn more.
If you are hurt or disabled, you may be entitled to benefits from an insurance company or Social Security. I'm Chris Helmer, an attorney at Clark Fork Law Offices. Our Missoula firm specializes in worker compensation, personal injury, and Social Security disability. There are many unknowns when injured or disabled. The other side is fighting hard. You should too. Call Clark Fork Law at 728-0168 for a free consultation or visit clarkforklaw.com. Again, 728-0168.
ESPN Radio for Western Montana, KKVU HD3 Stevensville, and 102.9 FM on K275BS Missoula. ESPN Missoula Sports Center.
Montana State is in search of a new offensive coordinator again. Good afternoon, Ryan Tutel, Colton Nuanez. Here's some sports news for you. Multiple sources confirmed to Skyline Sports that MSU offensive coordinator Matt Miller will take the job as Brian Harson's wide receivers coach at Boise State. The move was first reported by MTM Sports and confirmed by Mike Prater of the Idaho Press later on. Miller, a Helena Capital native and former Montana Gatorade Player of the Year, finished his playing career at Boise State in 2014 as the school's all-time leader in career receptions. He joined Jeff Choate's staff at Montana State as the wide receiver coach in 2016, a position he held for nearly 3 years, and then with 6 games left in the 2018 season, he was promoted to OC, a position he held for a year and a half through the end of this season.
We both got colds. Can't talk. Sorry.
Don't mind me.
In other FCS news, Missouri State of the Missouri Valley Football Conference nearly hired Art Briles, but maybe not. Instead, they hired Bobby Petrino, who is a Carroll College football product. And on the Matt Miller note, Boise State confirmed the hire earlier today. Montana State just confirmed the hire. Jeff Choate said, I want to thank Matt Miller for his hard work at Montana State. He's a bright, hard-working coach who is a big part of success of all that we achieved.
And finally, no basketball tonight for Montana or Montana State. The Grizzlies will play Idaho, and the Bobcats Eastern Washington Saturday.
This ESPN Sports Center is presented by Clark Fork Law. Ryan Tutel and Colter Nuanez.
Thank you. Now welcome back to the Kurtz Polaris Studios. It is Tutel and Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio, SWX Montana Television, and all over the world on the World Wide Web, 1029ESPN.com. You go there, you listen live on the Listen Live tab. The stream is brought to us by Opportunity Bank. Your local bank, your opportunity. If you'd like to pick up your phone and call, you can do that, 329-1899. 329-1899. All guests join us via the Rangish Brothers RV phone line. Also, if you missed anything in the first hour, you can check it out on the podcast. The podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts. Go check it out there. The Tutel Nuanez podcast. You search for it and listen and enjoy. It's brought to us by the Wingate by Wyndham Hotel and Blackfoot Communications. And also want to remind everybody, episode 1 with Jim Brandenburg out of the Grizz Greats Coaching Tree podcast. It is available. Well, also wherever you get your podcast, just search Grizz Greats, and you can get that one as well for you. I want to talk NFL. I'm determined to talk NFL, Colter. But we can just do a couple minutes here. I don't think I will be able to contain you, though, on this, I'm afraid. But when you talked about... Oh, go ahead.
I know you want to tread lightly, but I guess we had a little conversation off air, and basically your premise was that there's been... Many people in the state of Montana that have also been had somewhat of an elevated level of arrogance. I think that the difference is Montana is such an insulated. it's like I tell, we've worked with so many different TV colleagues throughout our time in the media in Montana. Right? I've been working in some form or fashion of media in Montana since 2006, and I've seen so many different TV personalities, sports reporters, guys and girls come and go. And a part of that is just because Missoula's a small market, Bozeman's a small market. You come here right out of school, you cut your teeth, and then I've known a lot of people that have gone on to great things. I mean, like look at Lindsay Theory right now. I mean, she works at ESPN covering USC and LA sports. She was at Great Falls less than 10 years ago. I remember hanging out with Lindsay all the time. Good for her. But the thing I always tell the TV kids is that when they ask me, what would you say is what it's like to cover sports in Montana? And I always tell them, almost everything that happens in the world of sports here in Montana matters nothing at all to everybody else in the world, but it means the world to the people of Montana. And I think that defines what Montana is in terms of Montana's isolated. It's off the beaten path. It's outside of the public consciousness in America by and large. And I think that that's why most of the people that live here want to live here.
Yeah.
We love the anonymous nature of it. And I think that the thing is, when people like Brock Osweiler and Ryan Leaf and the Petrinos leave the state, we root for their success so hard. And if they represent us in a way that is not how Montana is, like to see the way that some of those guys carried it, like to see the rise and fall of Ryan Leaf was an incredibly heart-wrenching experience for people across Montana. I mean, Jack Johnson is one of the most steadfast, great coaches in the history of high school football anywhere. I mean, the guy won 320 games, 13 state titles at Great Falls CMR.
And so for CMR to be effectively disowned by Ryan Leaf when he's at his height.
When Ryan Leaf was a finals for the Heisman, he told Sports Illustrated, I don't really claim Great Falls, Montana as my hometown anymore. I say I'm from Pullman. He was trying to be cute. But that's just like putting the dagger in the heart of everybody from Great Falls.
But also, it's so interesting, though, because he after his, comeback, his personal comeback, which has been really, wonderful to watch over the last 8-10 years, whatever it is, and actually goes back to Great Falls and hosts, is a speaker there, which, not the easiest thing in the world, as we talked about, probably for him to have done. I think that he has endeared himself for the first time to very many people broadly, and also in the state of Montana in particular. Here's the only thing that I was going to say, though, is that if you talk about the state of Montana, like we're painting with broad strokes, okay? We're talking about cultures of states and so forth and so on, and there's always counterexamples to this and everything else.
Absolutely.
And if you're in the state of Montana, you think that the people in the state of Montana are some of the greatest people, salt of the earth people that you could ever find. And you know what? They are. It's true. But culturally, if you are coming from the outside in, it's hard to break into that. Montanans are fiercely independent people. They pride themselves on a certain level of toughness. They pride themselves on a major level of independence. And while they are, I think, very broadly always able and willing to help, and especially help their neighbors, they're also not, necessarily the most inviting, welcoming group in general. Whereas if you go, when you go, my understanding, you move to the south, and it's just neighbors for days, bringing you pies, bringing you cakes, and I'm sure there's very many counterexamples to that, but, the southern hospitality and all of that kind of stuff, you don't get that in Montana. You sort of work your way into it. Now, we could talk about authenticity and all that kind of stuff all day long, and that's fine. But the thing that I find is interesting is I don't think it's just arrogance. I think there's plenty of arrogant, quote-unquote, arrogant people in the state of Montana or have left the state of Montana that are still beloved within the state of Montana because there isn't the acerbic nature person to person or interaction that we've seen. If you talk about Bobby Hauck, half of this state thinks Bobby Hauck is 100 times more arrogant than anybody else out there.
Sure.
Right? And
a lot of people in the state also think Jeff Choate thinks he's way smarter than he is and thinks he talks too much.
Right, all of that.
A lot of those are emotional because you're attached
it's
as a fan.
reflecting of you, okay?
Right.
But here's the thing we can say. Bobby Hauck, in the way that he comes across perfectly arrogant in a football sense all of the time.
No question.
But here's what's funny. Even when he relates to us as media members at the press conferences, it's not enjoyable. Okay, it doesn't get.
It's great before and after, never during.
But this is what I'm going to say. As soon as the cameras go off and everything, and he comes up, and now you're talking, and it's laughs, and it's slapping. That's why the people who love Bobby Hauck truly love him, because when he is with you, It's great. It's funny. It's fun. It's all of that stuff.
Absolutely.
And then when you watch him on TV, you go, well, who would ever want to talk to this guy? Well, the answer is pretty much everybody.
And I guess
and that's what's so interesting, because there's a disconnect there with the guys that you're talking about, that have left and now have been, who look like actually what they have appeared to be on TV and elsewhere is in fact true about them. Whereas there's like two competing narratives about, well, what's the reality of who is Bobby Hauck?
And I mean, it really just comes down to like Bobby Hauck, depending on what side of the aisle you fall on, he's either arrogant or he carries himself with the utmost confidence and this undeniable refusal to lose at literally anything. But Bobby walks, talks, acts, shakes hands like a Montanan. He showed up to the signing day press conference wearing a cinch rodeo shirt and Wranglers and cowboy boots. And like, you don't want to make too much out of somebody's appearance or whatever, but when you're doing it through the lens of a Montana, I mean, there's been plenty of guys that are larger than life or that are brash and somewhat in your face that have been in Montana. When you're doing it in Montana, that's great. And if you do it outside of Montana on a great, I mean, Mick Dennehy is Butte as there is from Butte. And when he was at Utah State, he was very Butte, but he wasn't misrepresenting Montana.
Right.
I think it's what people from Montana don't want to be represented with the dude who's riding the motorcycle with his mistress. Like that's not what we're about. We're about family values and being good neighbors and things like that. I mean, it's like David just sent along to us. David's from Little Rock, Arkansas, so he's very familiar with Arkansas football, the rise of Bobby Petrino at Arkansas, and the fall of Bobby Petrino at Arkansas. And it's like he said, I can understand why Montana people wouldn't want to necessarily claim Bobby Petrino.
Right.
And then when you know anybody that's crossed paths with these guys and stuff, I mean, it's I don't know. We don't want to sit here and just completely bash it, because I will say from a completely objective perspective, they've both done some great things in the game of football. Again, Bobby Petrino recruited Lamar Jackson to Louisville.
No, I mean, they're great. I mean, they've been unbelievable. Yes,
unbelievable.
Yes, no doubt.
But I think that like the Ryan Leaf example is just, it's the most pertinent one, because he rose to such high heights and everybody in Montana wanted to love him. And if Ryan Leaf would have failed on the football field like he did, but with way more grace, I think he never would have become this outsider like he did.
Yeah.
We would have just embraced him. But then it also just beckons the thought of, if he just would have lived with humility, would he have had all the trials and tribulations that he has had?
Right. I mean, exactly. I mean, it's the unknowable thing, right? Yeah, exactly. All right. Hey, this has been an enjoyable talk. Thank you for it, Coulter. Tutel Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take an early break. We're going to come back. We're going to talk NFL, okay?
No.
People, championship weekend coming back. Yes, David, we're doing it next.
Sometimes it's stressful juggling all your responsibilities on the weekends. You know you need to do your chores, you know you want to spend time with your family, but really, you just want to watch football all day. Paradise Falls is the perfect option for a family-friendly place to hang out and still have a chance to catch all the games. Open 7 a.m. till midnight and offering breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Paradise Falls has 30 big screen TVs, ESPN3 capabilities, and much, much more. Swing on by Paradise Falls on Brook Street anytime you're in the mood for some food or some football. Paradise Falls, 3621 Brook Street, Missoula's coolest hotspot. Hey, it's Coulter, and I'm here with Catherine from The Advocates. If you've been in a car accident or need help dealing with the insurance companies, you should give The Advocates a call. They can tell you if you have a case right over the phone.
That's right. It doesn't cost anything to call, and we'd be happy to talk to you and assess your situation. You don't want to have to deal with contacting the insurance companies and setting up a claim. We can do that for you. We take the hassle out of the process, so you can just focus on getting better.
There you go, folks. If you've been injured in an accident, give The Advocates a call, 406-640-4444, or online at montanaadvocates.com. You deserve The Advocates.
This is Mike Nugent with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. Berkshire Hathaway provides Western Montana with full-time real estate professionals for you whenever you need us. Our reputation as the state's most knowledgeable and available real estate group has helped build unmatched trust in the Garden City and statewide. If you have been thinking of making a real estate move in the short or long term, give me a call. No pressure, no expectations. Just professional opinions and service at whatever pace you are comfortable with. Give me, Mike Nugent, a call today, 531-1802. And remember, every question is good to ask.
Looking your best is no longer a luxury. It's more attainable than ever before. Learn how Northwest Plastic Surgery Associates' newest technology is making it possible to customize a treatment that meets your unique personal goals and budget like never before. Northwest Plastic Surgery Associates is the only provider in Montana equipped with the latest Cyton laser technology, which allows them to provide a range of minimally invasive but highly effective procedures from a single platform. From skin resurfacing to rejuvenation, wrinkles, acne, broken vessels, discoloration, even hair reduction and removal, they've got the equipment and the know-how to slow down aging and help you feel good about the way you look. Face, chest, hands, arms, real changes at the molecular level, not band-aids and cover-ups. Work that used to be only for the rich and famous. Book your consultation and learn how laser treatment can bring your inner beauty to the surface.
Call Northwest Plastic Surgery Associates today, 728-3811, or visit nwpsa.com.
It's that time of year for a winter break at the Ranch Club. Join us Sunday, January 19th from 11 to 5 p.m. Admission is $8 and children 5 and under are free. Proceeds benefiting the Lifeguard Group and Project Tomorrow. Enjoy ice skating, hockey, sledding, animal wonders, horse-drawn sleigh rides, cookie decorating, and much more. Admission includes chili, cornbread, cocoa, and coffee. Visit our website for a full list of events. This event sponsored by Barb Christian, Realtor, Berkshire Hathaway, and our sponsors.
ESPN Missoula Sports Center.
Montana State is once again searching for a new offensive coordinator. Good evening, I am Ryan Tutel. Multiple sources confirmed to Skyline Sports that MSU offensive coordinator Matt Miller will take the job on Brian Harson's staff. That has now been confirmed by both Boise State and Montana State. By the way, Brian Harsin, the head coach at Boise State, so that's where he's headed to. Miller, who is a Helena native, played football at Helena Capital, was also the Montana Gatorade Player of the Year. He finished his playing career at Boise State in 2014 as the school's all-time leader in career receptions. He joined Jeff Choate's staff at MSU as a wide receiver coach in 2016, where he was the wide receivers coach for almost 3 years. Then with 6 games left in the 2018 season, he was promoted to OC, a position he held through last year until leaving for Boise State now.
After an evening of conflicting reports that also included former Baylor head coach Art Briles in the mix, Missouri State hired Montana native Bobby Petrino. The school confirmed on Wednesday. As of late Tuesday night, Football Scoop had Briles taking the job, but Petrino ultimately was the hire. Petrino is a Lewistown native who played quarterback for his father, Bob Putter Petrino Sr. at Carroll College. Petrino has previously been the head coach at Arkansas, Western Kentucky, and Louisville.
Also, no Big Sky basketball for Montana or Montana State tonight. They will play on Saturday. The Grizzlies against Idaho, the Bobcats against Eastern Washington. Championship weekend, buddy. Both these games basically touchdown. Numbers on the board. We'll get into not so much the numbers of it, but the matchups of it. And I got some numbers for you. It's Tutel and Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. We are also across the state on SWX Montana Television. Hi, thanks for being with us. Hope you like my shirt. Coulter, the Green Bay Packers going to the state of California, which has been their absolute nemesis this season, playing in the state of California. The Tennessee Titans, they are going to play the Kansas City Chiefs, who were down by 24 before they won by 20. A very odd happenstance.
Odd? It's not,
yes.
It's not the word I would use. Completely out of the control, man. It was completely unique.
It was.
They went on a 51-7 run. Who's ever scored 7 touchdowns and 7 drives in the NFL? Who? I want to know if that's ever happened before in the playoffs. Ever.
Was it 7-7 or was it 6-7 and then
no,
the
it was
field goal and then a
7-7. It was 7-7, and then Patrick Mahomes tried to stay on the field to make it 8-8
to go for 4,
and then Andy Reid decided to kick the field goal instead.
Yeah, pretty remarkable. Let's start with the Packers 49ers football game, Coulter. First of all, this is bad news for the Green Bay Packers in the following sense. The Packers have lost 3 games this season. They lost to the Eagles in Lambeau in Week 4. After that, their 2 losses happened in 3 weeks, 2 out of 3 weeks. They lost to the Chargers, where they were, just completely humiliated by, at the time, a very bad Chargers team. 26-11. They lose by 15 there. And then this very 49ers team, they lost 37-8 2 weeks later. So what's that, 29 points that they lost by? So a grand total of 44 points that they've lost by in their 2 games in the state of California. I would say maybe don't go out the night before the NFC Championship game would be one recommendation I would make to the Green Bay Packers. The other thing I would say is run away from the entire defensive line of the San Francisco 49ers. That's the other thing. But here's one thing I want to go before we get into the actual matchup here, Coulter. I want to give you some quarterback stuff. Because Aaron Rodgers has been a little bit down this year in terms of what he has been, right?
Has he, or has it been an adjustment to the offense?
Well, let me ask you this, okay? Yeah, and right, that's a good question.
They're a run-first team for the first time in Aaron Rodgers' tenure as a starter.
It's amazing.
It's not as if they're doing it at an incredibly prolific level, but their offense starts and ends with the run game.
Okay. Derrick Henry, right, led the league in rushing this year. You know how many touchdowns he scored rushing? 16, Derrick Henry. You know how many touchdowns Aaron Jones scored rushing for the Green Bay Packers?
16.
So, and, Derrick Henry has basically 500 more yards, 1,500 and change compared to 1,000 and change for Aaron Jones, but nonetheless. But how about this, Coulter? You ready for this? One quarterback threw for 4,031 yards and 26 touchdowns so far this season.
A-Raj?
Another quarterback threw for 4,002 yards and 26 touchdowns this season.
Garoppolo.
Aaron Rodgers is the latter.
Okay.
Patrick Mahomes is the former. Now,
down year, 4,000 yards and 26 touchdowns.
Let's be
what a day to be alive.
And let's be clear now. This includes the playoff game for both of these guys, so that's a 17th game. And also, Mahomes was out for 3 games. Was it 3 or 4 games? I think 3 games. So I understand that Aaron Rodgers has thrown more passes, and his completion percentage is about 62%. Patrick Mahomes is at 66%. So Mahomes is completing at a higher rate and throwing for more yards per completion to basically have the exact same total number of yards. But everybody's on Patrick Mahomes, and they should be, because he is. I mean, he's absolutely can't miss TV. I mean, I said this before, Coulter. I stand by it. He's the best thrower of the football I have ever seen. Okay, best thrower of the football I've ever seen. So I'm not sitting here trying to say anything particularly at all. But at the end of the day, 4,000 yards and 26 touchdowns is what both of these guys have. And the difference is that the Chiefs are 1,000% in a pass-first offense, whereas, to your point, the Green Bay Packers, for the first time in Aaron Rodgers' career, are in a run-first or except at least a run-even offense. But let's talk about this matchup between the Packers and the San Francisco 49ers, because when you look at the defensive front and the return of several guys to that San Francisco has looked good all season long. They've looked elite, like unbeatable through spots. And they got 3 defensive starters back that they did not have in the last week or 2 of the season going into that divisional game against the Minnesota Vikings. And outside of one, pretty outstanding individual play by Stephon Diggs for the touchdown, the Minnesota Vikings did absolutely nothing. I mean, 0. Even with Dalvin Cook, I mean, we covered it, but it's remarkable. So they are now hosting a team who they beat in this very same field by 29 points in the regular season. And while I don't expect it to be a blowout like that again, the San Francisco 49ers have got to be licking their chops to be seeing the Green Bay Packers coming in there, it seems to me. At the same time, the Green Bay Packers can say, that was an anomaly. That's not who we are. We're a 14-3 football team with absolutely outstanding lines in both directions. I mean, the defensive line doesn't get better than what the 49ers have. The Packers' offensive line, though, is right there. They're certainly a top 5, maybe better than that, offensive line unit in the league this year, who got overrun the first time these two teams played, and nothing worked. If the San Francisco 49ers can do that again, they're going to, where is it, Miami? I think it's Miami, right? This year for the Super Bowl. That's it, and that's all. I'm excited about this football game, though, because Green Bay still gets to come in as, first of all, an underdog, which they absolutely should be, and also still play a little bit of the no-respect card. And there's certain guys who get off on that, nobody more than Aaron Rodgers, right? I mean, Aaron Rodgers has to have the chip on the shoulder thing going on, it seems like, to play his absolute best. And they, handled Seattle ultimately, and I think this is going to be a very good football game at the end. I don't know how pretty a game this is going to be. I think this is going to be a physical game. I'll say that. I mean, this is going to be a game where two teams are absolutely out for each other in a way that is going to be readily apparent on Sunday.
Broadly, I mean, I think the storyline is the grizzled gunslinger going for his last, maybe his last hurrah in Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. But also, when you break down against the up-and-coming team that's really been like kind of the fresh look, innovative squad of this season in the 49ers, I think Kyle Shanahan's done a great job. We were having this debate the other day. One of my buddies and I were. Sean McVay, the phenomenon that was Sean McVay, took the NFL by storm last year, and he's got his cute little gelled hair, and he's an offensive boy genius, and he's been working in the NFL since he was 12, and it's this great story. And I'm gonna steal Mike Dugar's line. Then in the offseason, everybody hired Sean McVay's cousins. Anybody that ever shook hands with Sean McVay gets a job. To me, in terms of the sustainability of winning in the NFL, Kyle Shanahan is superior to Sean McVay. He just doesn't have quite the hype. All the storyline around Kyle Shanahan seems to center upon who his father is, not what the accomplishments that he's made. There's a great article in Sports Illustrated about the way that the Niners have built this thing over the last couple of years, and it's so revelatory in terms of the cohesion and continuity between the general manager, the head coach, and having a steady vision for those two positions. What Kyle Shanahan and the way the Niners play is not nearly as sexy as the Rams. I get that. They're not trying to
Isn't it?
The common football watching public has no idea who Mr. Jurassic Park, the fullback, is. They don't know this dude because people don't care. Kyle Jurasek did not touch the ball last game. He's
Either
the best
do you,
player
it's
on
used
the field.
check.
Juszczyk. Kyle Juszczyk is San Francisco's one of better players. It's just when your best players are your D lineman and your fullback and your tight end, it's just not as sexy. But you mentioned the Chargers game for the Niners. I agree with your assertion that the Packers have one of the best offensive lines in football. If you follow Pro Football Focus, they do grading out of every position, and I think it's very indicative of guys at positions where production's only part of the story. I mean, you can tell who the best receivers and running backs are because of their statistics, even your middle linebackers and your defensive ends because of their stats. It's so hard to evaluate other spots sometimes in football. But for the Packers, you had David Bakhtiari and Brian Bulaga, who are becoming some of the more reputable offensive tackles in football as the two highest rated tackles in the game. But you also had Corey Linsley as the second highest rated center.
Linsley
in the game. The reason the Chargers ran roughshod over the Packers is they identified the strengths on that offensive line, but also the weaknesses. They moved Joey Bosa and Melvin Ingram inside, and they exploited the guards in the pass protection game.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be an interesting matchup for me, is that San Francisco, up and down their defensive line, I mean, they have absolutely the deepest defensive front in the NFL.
That's right.
Start with Nick Bosa and Armstead and DeForest Buckner. And, I mean, Solomon Thomas is a first-round draft pick. He comes off the bench. I mean, they have multiple dudes who can contribute. So that could be strength versus strength, but what adjustment does San Francisco make to exploit where maybe the offensive line isn't as strong? That part will be interesting. And then on the other side, the Packers' defense has been so much better but the Niners just wear you out. They got the best run-blocking offensive line in the league, and they run a true four-back system with a fullback.
They are, as a team, they're the number 2 rushing team in the NFL this season, behind Baltimore,
right,
which is okay, fair enough.
I mean, Baltimore, yeah, they had the ultimate +1.
Right, and they are the number 1 pass defense in the league. Now, they're only a middle-of-the-road rush defense, interestingly enough, but that's probably just because they are coming after everybody in the backfield all the time. So that does open up some gaps, and I think that you got to start, Matt LaFleur, who's very good at this, by the way, with the underneath pass game, passing to running backs and slants and things like that underneath, and taking advantage in that sumo wrestling style of a defense that absolutely just wants to be so aggressive and come after you. And this is going to, and Green Bay has the quarterback that can manipulate that to a certain extent. But if the Green Bay offensive line, here's the thing, you could have the number 1 defensive line and the number 1 offensive line going up against each other, and that means nothing if the defensive line is just flat out better than everybody. Who cares about stats and ratings and everything like that? In the first game that these two teams played, that was the case. And the last time I checked, it's the same people playing this football game a couple of months down the line. Now, you can change your schemes or whatever, but, you find me, look, man, Lindsley, Bakhtiari, Bulaga, whoever, all of them, they're great. You find me the guy who can block anybody named Bosa, and that guy's worth $50 million a year because he doesn't exist. That's what you're dealing with, among others. So that's that. It's a major. It's going to have to be schematically overcome. I don't think that Green Bay or anybody can just line up man for man with the San Francisco defensive line and block it up well enough to actually win a 60-minute football game. It's just not going to happen. And so at some point, Matt LaFleur, who, by the way, is another young, offensive-minded, whatever guru, is going to have to prove his mettle against this outstanding defense.
Here's the thing that's fascinating to me is that we talk about all the things that the common football fan doesn't understand. The number one thing that the common football fan does understand is quarterback play. And I think it's so fascinating that Aaron Rodgers has been the golden boy, the considered, if not the, one of the 3 best quarterbacks in the league for 10 years. And then this year, just because of a transition in offense that has resulted in greater team success than the last couple of years, his reputation has taken a hit. I just think it's fascinating that coming into this game, by and large, it seems as if the collective populace that follows the NFL thinks the Niners are the favorite because they have been on a roll and it's in San Francisco. But I guess what I'm saying is if this exact matchup was played out any of the last 10 years until this year, everybody that's just the common middle-of-the-road football fan would say the Packers are the favorites because they got Aaron Rodgers, and I haven't heard that much as a narrative. Why? What do you think that – do you still think – that Aaron Rodgers is elite enough to be the X factor in the game? We talk about this with the Seahawks all the time. The X factor for the Seahawks, no matter how they evolve offensively, is Russell Wilson. If you got Russell Wilson, you got a chance. Do you still think that's the case with the Packers?
Of course. Was he not the X factor against Seattle? Who threw the ball to Devontae Adams for a first down on the same drive that he then threw a first down to Jimmy Graham under great pressure, under duress? That's who did it.
And that's what the common fan has to understand is that the Packers' philosophy now has evolved to just get it to a third manageable because we got the dude who's going to convert all of them.
And the other thing, too, is, look, throwing for 400 yards and 3 touchdowns is great. But nothing is better than converting a 3rd and 9, even if you only throw for 250 yards or whatever it is, to have the timeliness of what they're doing. And that's one thing that Green Bay has really never had. This is a historically awful team when it comes to 3rd down. It's unbelievable, actually, how bad they've been on 3rd down.
But then
mostly because they can't run.
They were, 9 of 12 last week? I think they converted
I think they were 11 of 15 or 16. But
sure,
yeah,
but they converted, I think, 7 of their first 8.
Yeah. Here's the thing. Here's what bothers me, because this is what's going to happen, Coulter. What do you have in both of these championship matchups? Well, I don't know that the Titans are an elite defense, but they're
I think they are.
They're a better defense than the
Stats
Chiefs.
don't bear that out.
Okay, they're not statistically a great defense.
I should say this. I don't think they're elite defense. I think they have a couple of elite and very underrated players. Who's the safety? Kevin. It's spelled like Bird, but I don't think his last
Kevin Byard.
Kevin Byard.
Yeah.
But he is an excellent player. But also, I said this when we were watching the Titans game last weekend. I think Jarrell Casey is one of the most underrated players in the NFL. I mean, Jarrell Casey is nasty.
He lit up. Look, man, you just held the Baltimore Ravens to 12 points, and the Tom Brady led New England Patriots to 13, and also scored a touchdown. So in the postseason, they have been the absolute real deal. Here's my point. Here's my issue, because this is going to happen.
Yep.
Either it's, Kansas City versus Green Bay, say, in the Super Bowl, and everybody goes, see, you have to have an elite quarterback. It's all about the quarterback play. Or it's San Francisco and Tennessee. I mean, obviously, those aren't the only two options, but then you go, see, it's all about the defense. Defense wins championships. And nobody, they're all here. Who knows what's going to happen?
I was arguing with this about a fellow Viking fan recently, because I was saying that the number one thing that's going to keep the Vikings from winning a Super Bowl with this group that has several players that make it them have.
Where did you find another Viking fan?
Is the fact that they did this Kirk Cousins contract, and Cousins is just not good enough. And my buddy was arguing they had to do it because you can't win a Super Bowl with Case Keenum. And my biggest argument was that if you have one of, if not the most elite defense in the league, which the Vikings are not quite there, but they're more close to there than having the best quarterback in the league, you can. And I did a breakdown of him of the last 20 Super Bowls, and there's been 10 guys who you could argue are by no question not elite. And if you include guys like Joe Flacco in that, it might even be 12 or 13 that have won conference championships, not won Super Bowl championships, but have won conference championships as quarterbacks that are not Aaron Rodgers caliber, that are not Patrick Mahomes caliber. That you stole the words right out of my mouth, because I was going to ask you a two-part question.
Let's hear it.
One, is Jimmy Garoppolo good enough yet to win a conference championship? And two, I think that the national media, I don't think this, I know that the national media pumps the storylines that are most easily consumable for the American public to absorb to the masses. And a lot of times those are also the best storylines. They are. But I also think that it makes it so that it makes the national football watching public doesn't analyze the game from anywhere beyond the quarterback perspective.
Yeah.
And I think that what you just said to me is the evolution in the NFL that I love. You looked at the final 8 teams in the playoffs. There's only a couple that are built upon. It was like 50-50. You either got Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, or Patrick Mahomes, or you don't, but you've done it in a completely different way. And I think it's showing the various ways to win in football. So first, is Jimmy Garoppolo ready? Is he good enough to win a conference championship?
He is on the 49ers. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot. I mean, to your point, there's a lot of quarterbacks that are ready to win a conference championship if you're on the 49ers, who are the number one rushing team in football and have one of the baddest, if not the baddest, defense in football.
Right.
I mean, so if you're looking to be optimistic, if you're a Green Bay fan, that's exactly where you go. You go, are you kidding me? Jimmy Garoppolo versus Aaron Rodgers, no contest. And it is no contest. But you know what? They're not playing each other. It's 22 dudes and more who are playing against each other. And, they're absolutely critical to their team's success. And I do think that if Green Bay can slow the run down, I don't think they're going to stop the run against San Francisco. But if they can play well against the run, which is what's one thing that we know about the word Shanahan? Run the football, right? I mean, going all the way back. So that's a huge, huge ask. But if you can hold them below their season average of 144 yards a game on the ground and limit them to 110 or something like that, and force Jimmy Garoppolo to throw the football. See, the Green Bay has a hugely underrated secondary. They're really good on the back end defensively.
They are.
And they have proven now with Zadarius Smith and Peyton Smith and Kenny Clark that they can finally get after the quarterback a little bit. So passing the football, it's not easy against the Green Bay team, and they can take the ball away and put themselves in a great position that way with turnovers and so forth. So I think that's a real possibility, and I think Green Bay is more likely to create turnovers defensively, oddly enough, than is San Francisco. San Francisco is more likely, because of Aaron Rodgers, merely to make stops, which is, That's the name of the game, right, at the end of the day. But also, if it's going to be a close game and one or two plays are there, I think they're there to be made. But yes, Jimmy Garoppolo 100% is in a position to win the NFC Championship and go to the Super Bowl and perhaps win a Super Bowl. And it won't be because of him. And that is not unprecedented. As you pointed out, there's plenty of quarterbacks who haven't been the reason that they've done it. Right. But you do have to make a play at some point. Like he's going to have to do something.
More importantly, you have to not sink the ship.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So tell me this. One last question on this before we get into our Prep Extra segment here. Aaron Rodgers, I think, is the quarterback in the modern game, certainly, but perhaps in the modern era of the NFL, that needs that second Super Bowl to truly. Everybody that's watched Aaron Rodgers play knows the unbelievable, transcendent talent that he is. And before Patrick Mahomes burst on the scene last year, I think we both would have agreed that Aaron Rodgers was one of, if not the best throwers of the football we've ever seen.
Yeah.
His reputation and pivotal role for the success of this Packers team has been dissipated a little bit just because of the way that they've changed their scheme the way that they've revamped their defense. And that's football in a nutshell. It's why it's the ultimate team sport.
Yeah.
You can have the greatest quarterback in the world like the Packers did with Aaron Rodgers, and you're likely not going to get out of the NFC until you have a little bit of help elsewhere.
You got to have it. Yeah.
But if Aaron Rodgers, this is his I believe his 11th year as the starter.
Yeah, maybe 12th.
11th or 12th year as a starter, 14th or 15th year in the league.
Mm-hmm.
But he's got to have this second one. He's got to have this second championship, whether it's now or in the next couple years, to really affirm his legacy. But will his legacy be impacted because, say they win the Super Bowl this year. If the Packers win the Super Bowl this year, will it impact Aaron Rodgers' legacy because it wasn't the last one they won? It was him.
13th year as a starter.
It was him. They won 3 road playoff games to go to the Super Bowl and then won the Super Bowl with him throwing from his hip. And, I mean, that was one of the great catch lightning in a bottle and roll all the way to the title.
The answer to your question is 100% no.
I agree.
It will not be. Nobody knows how Tom Brady played.
12th. I bet.
They only know that he won 6 Super Bowls and was in 3. Nobody knows that Peyton Manning noodle-armed his way to the best defense in the NFL to win a Super Bowl.
I do think that people do know that, though, and I do think it is little bit.
Everyone remembers that.
Everybody remembers that.
Whether they remember it, but nobody's going, oh, well, Peyton, no, he really only won one asterisk. Nobody.
I get the point you're trying to make. I get the point you're trying to make, but I think that Tom Brady is actually completely unique in this argument.
Of course.
Because Tom Brady's such a little pretty boy who has established such a national reputation that he's blinded the whole football following public to the fact that he's only been a cog. I mean, Tom Brady has been the guy who quarterbacked them to Super Bowls probably twice out of the 6 that they've won.
Yeah.
He's been a pivotal cog, but a cog in a machine. Whereas like Peyton Manning's first Super Bowl, it was Peyton Manning.
Yeah.
Brett Favre, it was Brett Favre. You know what I'm saying?
And I mean, the best Super Bowl that Tom Brady ever played, he lost to Philadelphia with 500 yards or whatever.
No doubt.
So, but he's different anyway because he's been in so many.
I just think it's so fascinating the way that we hold quarterbacks to the standard where how many Super Bowls did you win? Mm-hmm. And it's funny because Eli Manning is like this guy who, is he a Hall of Famer? I don't know. Eli Manning quarterbacked the Giants to 2 Super Bowls. Eli Manning was one of the pivotal factors in winning those Super Bowls.
That's what I think.
No doubt. But then there's also guys like John Elway, who's undeniably a great quarterback. But actually, when John Elway won the Super Bowl, it wasn't John Elway that won the Super Bowls or Peyton Manning. Like Peyton Manning's last Super Bowl, he was a shell of himself.
But there's more than that to it. I mean, it's getting into the right plays. It's the preparation for everybody to be at their best, which he is so responsible for. And I think Aaron Rodgers is responsible for.
Well, A-Rod is nowhere. I mean, John Elway was nowhere close to what he was during the 80s when he was leading them to Super Bowls, but losing.
Yeah.
Peyton Manning, shell of himself. Aaron Rodgers is not that. He just had a scheme change.
And he still slangs it.
Gotta go.
Quick break. Come back. We're going to do a little bit of prep extra with you, and we're going to unleash David Graff on the humanity next.
Here's to you, the intrepid explorers, driven doers, and off-road adrenaline addicts. Thanks for making Polaris America's best-selling off-road brand. It's time to celebrate with great deals on the world's biggest and best off-road lineup. Live life wide open in a high-performance RZR. Tackle anything from mountains to mud holes on a legendary Sportsman ATV. Get more done with a hard-working Ranger, or elevate your adventure in a versatile Polaris General. Now's the time to find your perfect ride. With financing as low as 3.99% APR for 36 months and savings up to $3,500 during the Polaris New Year's sales event at Kurtz Polaris, 2904 West Broadway in Missoula and Highway 83 in Sealy. The mountains are full of snow, and Kurtz has all the best machines, apparel, and accessories to take full advantage of the season. Online at KurtzPolaris.com, the most fun you can have in snow. Kurtz Polaris, winter awaits. Offers valid in U.S. through 2/29/20 on new 2016 through 2020 vehicles. Subject to credit approval. Offers vary by model. See dealer for details. Always wear a helmet. Never drink and ride. In Western Montana, we know shopping local matters, and you may think you'd pay more for the quality and customer service that comes with it, but not at Selway Armory. Selway Armory is locally owned with knowledgeable specialists that can answer your questions. In addition to the expertise, though, Selway Armory also has a bigger selection and lower prices than the box stores. When you're in the market for firearms and accessories, save money with the experts at Selway Armory. Selway Armory, 2825 Stockyard Road, Unit E6, and online at SelwayArmory.com.
Hey there, Colter Nuanez from your favorite daily sports talk show, Two Tell Nuanez. I'm here with Tom from Aspen Sound. Tom, last winter I got a sweet car starter. It's something I think everybody needs.
You know, Colter, I couldn't agree more, and my wife sure thinks so too. We've got a lot of sweet deals. We actually have it capable now where you can start it from your phone from anywhere you'd like. We have two-way remotes that'll confirm to you the vehicle started all the way down to our basic package starting at just $299 installed. Come on in and check us out.
Feel the music at Aspen Sound.
More bedrooms, a big yard, better commute. Whatever your reason to buy a new home, it's the right reason. In a tough housing market, the smartest thing you can do is pre-qualify for a loan before you start looking. Farmers State Bank makes it easier than ever to start the loan process with online checklists, forms, and calculators. Your dream home is out there. Get started today at farmersebank.com. Farmers State Bank, an equal housing lender and member FDIC.
This is Tucker Sargent, head coach of the University of Montana lacrosse team, and I want to share the game of lacrosse with everyone. Now is the time to get your son or daughter registered for lacrosse with the Missoula Lacrosse Club for the spring season. Missoula Lacrosse Club is for boys and girls ages kindergarten through 8th grade, and no experience is necessary to join. Lacrosse is fun, fast-paced, and available to anyone who wants to play. Early registration discount ends January 31st, so go to MissoulaLacrosse.org to register and learn more.
If it matters to Missoula, it matters to us. Ryan Tutel and Colter Nuanez on 102.9 ESPN Radio.
Welcome back to Tell Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio, SWX Montana Television. If you missed anything in the show, catch it on the podcast. The To Tell Nuanez podcast, available wherever you get your podcast. It's available thanks to the Wingate by Wyndham Hotel and Blackfoot Communications. Colter, it is time now for our Prep Extra segment. It's brought to us by the Farmers State Bank. Farmers State Bank, your Montana bank since 1907. And one coach, Colter, particular in the state of Montana, high school coach, up for a national award potentially.
And deservedly so. Eric Pearson's a longtime head coach at Helena High, and Helena High this last year just won their third straight Class AA state title, and there's only been 3 girls basketball teams in the history of the state of Montana that have won 3 consecutive Class AA titles. Mm-hmm. Great Falls High did it in the mid-1980s. Missoula Sentinel did it, I guess, the end of last decade into the beginning of this decade, and now Helena High. And they've had some tremendous players. I mean, Camden Hilborn, who was multiple-time state tournament MVP. She dabbled in basketball at Montana State and now is actually running track at Carroll. And Jamie Pickens, the 2-time Montana Gatorade Player of the Year, who's now a true freshman for the Lady Grizz. So Eric Eric Peterson, he is up for the 2020 National High School Athletic Coaches Association National Coach of the Year.
Fantastic.
So, impressive. Other prep news coming up. The one high school wrestling doesn't necessarily get the shine that it probably deserves. There's been some outstanding wrestlers that have come out of the state of Montana. I mean, even just in recent years, there's been kids that have gone on to Minnesota and Iowa State and Power 5 programs, to be sure. But one of the cool parts about wrestling, the state tournaments, the all-class state tournament in Billings is a couple weeks earlier than basketball. It's not March Madness. It's usually late February that it occurs. But this time of year, mid-January to late January, there starts to be these invitational tournaments. And the thing that's so cool about high school wrestling is that it's an individual sport and a team sport at the same time. But when you have weight classifications, you can have the best of the best going against each other. And it's at the same time a state tournament primer while also sort of like an all-class battle for pride. The Tom LaProwse Invitational was in Bozeman last weekend. That draws teams from all over the state, all classifications. This weekend in Missoula, the Jug Beck Classic is going to be here in Missoula, and that's another one of the big invitational tournaments.
Yeah.
But I think it's cool because a lot of times you'll have a bunch of guys in the same weight class that are probably not going to compete against each other hardly at all, except for in these sort of invitational tournaments. So at one time, it's a state tournament primer, but also say you're the best guy in AA at 152, and you get to go against the best guy from Class B in 152. There's no disparity in far as numbers.
That's right.
If you're tough, you're tough. And if you know how to do it, you know how to do it. But also, you might be the guy who goes undefeated against AA competition in your weight class, but then you get to go against the other guy who's going to go undefeated in a different classification. And so it's cool that you get these crossovers where it might be a match, you win, lose, or draw. You never know. But it has really no impact on your actual state tournament livelihood.
Standings, right.
But can also propel you then to being able to do it in the state tournament. I mean, I remember when Tucker Yates, former defensive tackle for Montana State, was wrestling at Colstrip. And I mean, as you can imagine, he was a heavyweight, but he would come to these tournaments, and I mean, he would just toss these AA kids around, and everybody, who's this Class B kid? And it's like, well, I'm going to go on a tangent here for a minute, but if I was a college football coach, especially at the FBS level, or the FCS level, state of Montana Big Sky coach, recruiting rural areas, rural states like Montana, I would make a priority to go to football games, certainly watch the kids move and all that. But I would be planting my butt at wrestling tournaments.
Yeah.
I mean, if you are a heavyweight wrestler that's agile on your feet and you got the toughness to do it and you got the dedication to do it, that's the type of guy I want to recruit.
It's a good spot. No
I mean,
doubt.
look at Tucker Yates. I mean, I remember Tucker Yates, everybody was they were going back and forth. The kid's 5'11", so is he going to be a D1 guy?
Yeah.
Well, then he wins the state tournament. He wins the Class B state tournament after tearing his pec, and everybody was like, oh, yeah, that guy's a full-ride guy because how tough can you possibly be?
Right. Good point. Very good. Coulter, thank you. That is our Prep Extra segment. It's brought to us by the Farmers State Bank. Farmers State Bank, a fourth-generation Montana bank. Local leadership for over 110 years with all the modern amenities you've come to expect. That is Farmers State Bank. Okay. Boys and girls, now this is not a secret here, but David Graff has been back there producing for us for some number of months, going back into last year now. And he's also been instrumental in the podcasts that we've done, both the Speculators and now the Grizz Greats podcast series. And it is time to welcome him to Tutel Nuanez on the radio show. David, do you have your buttons in order where you can speak to the people live on the radio?
Howdy, Ryan.
Hello,
Hi, David.
Now, here's the ironic thing. Now, David is constantly talking in our ears while we're attempting to do the show, which is very disconcerting and discombobulating. But also, evidently, has, without our knowledge of it, spoken actually on the air, and people have heard you speak and say things, but we didn't realize because it all sounds the same to us. We got no way to assess this. So you have been sort of, moonlighting on the show anyway already. Is that right?
I just chimed in the other day when you guys were wrong about SEC football.
Now here's the thing, David.
Typical. Standard.
People will not, they'll come to appreciate this and love this about you, but we've never been wrong. We're the hosts of the show. So, I don't know where you're getting that, because you're from, Arkansas and close to the SEC, and we know. You can't tell me that Vanderbilt has an expectation that it's going to be as good as Alabama.
Vanderbilt.
That's what I said.
Not Vanderbilt.
Vanderbilt. Yeah.
Vanderbilt.
Looks great.
David is also
Vanderbilt.
the absolute master of pronunciations. He's like the Google of pronunciations.
Mm-hmm.
This is true.
So, David.
And I am not.
We're excited to have you
here.
That
is also true.
We're excited to have you here on the show. And we're interested to know, okay, just, for the people out there, what is it that you think that you're going to bring? What is your role in the live show going to look like here as we head off into 2020?
Just here to provide the facts and the pronunciations mostly.
So you're just going to be like the keeper of accuracy, and you're just going to interrupt us to make sure that we've got Kyle Juszczyk correct and so forth and so on as we go.
That, yeah.
Well done with the Juszczyk pronunciation, Gus.
Well, thank you. I try not to read the backs of the things. It never really works out. Mahomes, I was terrified of that. I was like, how do you say that? And then it's like, oh, well, it's just Mahomes. But it doesn't always work out that way. Well, David, you've done a fabulous job. You deserve a big tip of the cap and credit for the Grizz Greats, because in addition to the production of the podcast series, you also were the one who was doing all the legwork and lining up guests. You've gotten, by the way, this show has gotten a ton of guests. It would never have ever come close to getting without David's work during the days to track down guests and things like that. So we appreciate that very much. And we will see, as we go, what sorts of fights you decide to instigate when the constant corrections are pointed out, where heretofore we just assumed everything we said was exactly spot on the way that it was supposed to be,
Sounds good to me.
Doesn't sound as good as that scratch. What do we got here? Yeah, that's exactly what's going on. I know. It's not the record, it's the audio grid. That's the way the thing goes. David, thank you very much for being on the show. We appreciate you.
I appreciate you, Ryan.
Boys and girls, Tutel Nuanez, ESPN Radio, SWX. We'll see you tomorrow.
Hi there. It's Les Schwab Tires. Well, more like Les Schwab alignment and brakes and shocks and wheels and tires. Now, some tire places don't offer all that. They only sell tires. And we're not sure how they sleep at night, because all those services affect things like steering and stopping. That's why we offer more than tires to help keep you safe. Stop by or book an appointment at leschwab.com. Les Schwab Tires, doing the right thing since 1952.
On Russell, across from the fairgrounds.
The big skies are open. Go wild with Opportunity Reward Checking. Go ahead, jump, dance, shout. Opportunity Reward Checking will make you do that. Go wild when you get your 1% cash back on qualified debit card purchases. It all starts with an Opportunity Reward Checking account from Opportunity Bank. Visit a branch today to get started. Then go wild and spend your 1% cash back however you want. Go wild with Reward Checking from Opportunity Bank. Some restrictions may apply. Member FDIC.
Have you been in an accident and have no idea what to do? I'm here with Catherine from the Advocates Injury Attorneys.
Unfortunately, people are injured in accidents every day, and dealing with the insurance company can add even more pain to an already bad situation. That is where hiring the advocates can help. Let us guide you through the process and take on the hassles for you so you can just focus on getting better.
If you've been injured in an accident, give the Advocates a call, 406-640-4444, or online at montanaadvocates.com. The Advocates are on your side.
No matter how far you may go, there's always one just down the road. Town Pump, ooh, pump it up.
Thirsty? Stop by your local Town Pump. Pepsi and Mountain Dew 1 liters are on sale. Buy 2 and get 1 free. Frappuccino 13.7 ounce, 2 for $5. Easy, convenient, and right down the road from you. Town Pump.
Town Pump. Right down the road. Pump it up. Oh, yeah.
Hey guys, it's Ryan and Coulter from Tutel and Nuanez here to tell you about our brand new project that we are so excited to release, Grizz Greats, the Coaching Tree, the podcast series with all of the living coaches in the history of the University of Montana men's basketball team.
From the legendary godfather of the coaching tree, Judd Heathcote, a string of some of the most successful coaches in college basketball had their careers start at the University of Montana.
It really is a remarkable group when you sit back and think about it and what all of these guys have accomplished throughout their careers in the game. And Coulter, I'm excited because Wednesday, our first one comes out, Jim Brandenburg.
Brandenburg was only the head coach at Montana for 2 years, but he was certainly the bridge from Judd Heathcote to Mike Montgomery, and that set the stage for the rest of this tremendous coaching tree. We'll be excited each week throughout the winter and spring to roll out Grizz Greats, the Coaching Tree podcast.
Just search Grizz Greats wherever you get your podcasts and listen all season long. Grizz Greats, a Coaching Tree podcast, is brought to you by Blackfoot Communications.
ESPN Radio for Western Montana, KKVU HD3 Stevensville, and 102.9 FM on K275BS Missoula. Sports radio for Florence, Lolo, Frenchtown, Arley, St. Ignatius, and Missoula. Western Montana plays here. 102.9 ESPN Radio.